welcome to this February 10th, 2020 City Council work session. We are going immediately into an executive session. The mayor and city council will now meet in executive session held pursuant to ORS 192.6602E to deliberate with persons designated to negotiate real property transactions. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. It looks like they're outside already. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made in executive session. At the end of the executive session, we may return to open session and welcome the audience back into the room. And with that, I will turn it over to Thank you, and return to an open city council meeting.
All right, let's give them a little bit of a chance to get in.
That's my stock line. Does anybody have any questions? What's the capital of Vermont?
Montpelier.
Okay. Really?
2 million for.
No, it's 10 if the number is 20. $22, actually, the number's 11. I will. Thank you. Time value of money, it actually pushes to 12.
So glad you're here.
Who's counting? 12 years.
It's just you and Ian. Okay. Just making sure. I'm just gonna, I told him if he jumped up, if you wanna just grab that one and go, or
I'm not gonna vote.
you wanna borrow this one?
Coughing right into it.
You can share one.
Okay,
I think we're mostly settled.
No other way.
Good evening, Council. I'm here, I'm Will Dowdy, I'm in Community Development, and here to give you another update on the Town Square with Francesca Gambetti, our owner's representative, and Ian Gelbrick, the lead design on the design lead on the Town Square architecture. I imagine you'll be familiar with this image before we're all said and done with this project.
Kilimanjaro?
We've been working with the city manager's metaphor of a path marked by a series of rock cairns, a course with easily anticipated mileposts. The last time I was here, I introduced decisions about City Hall that are critical for the project to move forward. I'm here this evening to ask you for direction on these topics, and the team will take that information and use it in developing the initial designs with cost estimates that we'll bring back to you in the spring. Before we dive in, I'd like to give you a quick update on the rest of the project. The architect and landscape architect teams continue to do their work, refining the concept plan and integrating a wide variety of technical needs and stakeholder comments. We've had early meetings with staff in the city's Permit Information Center to make sure that our approach to the project will run smoothly through the permitting phase. And last week, the project team hosted an evening open house event at World Pies. The event gave community members an opportunity to meet the architects and landscape architects as the design team digs deeper into the buildings and themes that will be in the town square. We shared some images with you in an email, and Ian is able to talk to you a little bit more about what those drawings had in them.
Thank you. Great to be here with you again. We're excited to be moving the project along. What you see on the screen are our preliminary designs for the farmers market. In early conversations with both farmers market staff as well as city staff, there was a desire to pull ideas about agriculture and find a way to make them fit in the city in an appropriate manner, and also to find a space that felt light and open and was very transparent and let the activity of the market shine through. And so the design in front of you is trying to stay as simple and clear as possible, which sort of relates to those agricultural buildings that we all know and love in the landscape, but refined enough to sort of sit appropriately in the town square site. The City Hall is on a little bit of a different track in terms of its overall design. What's in front of you here is not a design. It's more of a starting piece to understand what's appropriate for where things get positioned within the building, particularly the public spaces and how those relate to the town square site. And then what's the appropriate size and scale of the building relative to the surrounding area as well as the town square site. And so each of these starts to explore the orange pieces, which are the more public meeting spaces, including the chamber, the work session room, and the public meeting spaces, and whether those are all ground floor, stacked and just facing the square, and then where staff offices are in relation to that.
So this slide may look familiar. It's actually less interesting than the drawings, but but this is the part that we need to go through to get to that next part. And like I said, we'll be back later this spring to dive into both the farmers market piece with the park blocks and then the city hall. So these are the decision points that you discussed in December. They lay the foundation for moving forward with the city hall part of the town square. In general, they have to do with how big the building should be, how efficient it should be, and how resilient. Before going any further, I want to point out one small edit. In the last time we talked about the opportunity for council chamber and work session space to be double up as community spaces. I heard a lot of interest in this from you, and Ian and his team have said that they expect that any of their designs would be able to allow for those flexible uses. So it becomes more of an operational question and not a design piece. So for that reason, I've taken that out of this conversation and focused your attention on these 4 design issues. So we'll run through each of these items, and then we can answer any questions you may have. As you recall, the first question that we posed to you in December is whether you want to build additional floors of leasable real estate, either office or residential, beyond the needs of the city hall. Benefits include additional density on the site. Other considerations include the increased complexity of the project, impacts to the budget and schedule, and no certainty that the additional floors would provide additional funds to the project. The architects need this information because it impacts the foundation and structural systems of the building. It impacts the vertical circulation and fire safety and the configuration of the first floor and entrances. So it becomes very complicated to add in at a later time or take out at a later time if we don't have a clear decision now. The next topic is underground parking. The decision that we will need is, do you want the town square to include underground parking beneath the farmers market and city hall? During the concept design, we explored options for 1 to 2 floors of parking beneath the farmers market and city hall. That had about 100 to 200 spaces depending on what you did. Our cost estimator found that it was basically the same cost as putting underground parking in anywhere downtown, about $90,000 per space, which is $9 million for 100 spaces, or $18 million for 200 spaces. Current estimates of public above-ground garages, like building a new Pearl Street garage, that's about half the cost, approximately $40,000 per space, and that model yields 250 spaces and a quarter block. The benefits of building underground parking are the easy access it provides to people from around the region and the one-to-one replacement of the existing amenity. One consideration is the opportunity cost. How else could you use $9 to $18 million to support downtown parking? Another is the impact of the project schedule. Incorporating parking underneath the farmers market block would make our current schedule, our construction timeline, impossible. And that would displace the farmers market for a year and mean the grand opening would be in April of 2022. The architects need this decision before they can design the final foundations and structure. We also need this decision so that we can determine our final project schedule and coordinate with the Lane County Farmers Market about their upcoming seasons. So the next 2 topics are focused on efficiency and resilience, and Francesca and Ian will take you through those.
Thanks, Will. So the question before you related to environmental sustainability is whether City Hall should be designed in keeping with the current standards, city standards of achieving LEED Silver certification. In exploring different options for this, we kind of looked at it in 2 different ways. One is within the LEED framework, are there different ways to approach the project? And then compared to LEED, are there other rating or other certification programs that could be explored in lieu of LEED? So I'll deal with the first one. So this is just looking at staying within the LEED framework and approaching the project in a couple of different ways. One, the first column is to design to LEED standards. The second is to have a LEED Silver equivalent, and the third is to actually be certified. So designing to the LEED Silver standard would mean that we would use the LEED scorecard as a best practices guide, but we wouldn't monitor or field verify the project during construction and at the end of the project to make sure that we are meeting all of the requirements, and we wouldn't get certified at the end. So we're calling this as baseline cost. An alternative would be to do the LEED Silver equivalent, so actually go ahead and monitor the project through construction, and at the end, and simply not take that last step of actually getting the certification. And then the last step is just adding a certification on top of that. You can see the difference between the LEED Silver equivalent and getting certified is really minimal. It's about a $5,000 premium to get the actual certification. Bigger difference is between the LEED Silver standard, which eliminates some of that admin cost and monitoring cost through construction that the design team or third-party consultants would incur during the construction phase. So that difference is, $40,000 to $45,000, depending on whether you get the certification. So pretty nominal cost difference. Now looking, kind of taking a step farther back and just looking at other certification programs that maybe the city would want to consider. We had Brightworks is our sustainability consultant that is a sub-consultant to the design team. So they put forth a couple of different options. There are a number of certification programs that are out there now. And that range from pretty simple to very complicated and aspirational, at the high end being like probably the Living Building Challenge, which is a pretty exclusive program that has very high standards of sustainability. The LEED certification comes in has different levels of certification. So the base level is certified, then there's silver, gold, and platinum. So ranges in cost and stringency from low to quite high to get to the platinum level. The biggest advantage, I think, of the LEED program is both the team and the community's familiarity with the program. It is just very universally recognized, and there's just high familiarity with it. A couple of other ones that were thrown out for consideration is Green Globes, which is a program that came out a little bit after LEED. LEED's been out for about 20 years now. It came out in 2000. Green Globes in about 2005, so shortly thereafter. Green Globes, there has a basic level that's even easier, I guess, to qualify for than the LEED certified, but also can have more stringent levels as well. So stringency ranges from low to high. Again, biggest disadvantages, I think there's just very little familiarity with it, both on the design team, the consultant team, and in the community. And then there's a higher level one, the core green building certification, and this one was really developed in an effort to try and bridge maybe like the LEED Platinum or a high-level common program with the livable buildings program, which is so it's trying to find kind of more of a middle ground. Again, also more costly, less familiarity with it. So these were there's many more than this out there in the market, but these are some of the more commonly known ones, and kind of shows you the range of general costs and advantages. Saving questions for the end, or should, yeah? Okay. Moving on to you for seismic.
So you asked us last time what seismic standards should the city hall be designed to meet. And last time we reviewed 3 different levels of seismic performance. Life safety, as everyone remembers, is what all buildings are designed to at this point, which means that everybody gets out safely. But whether or not it's economically effective to try and repair that building is a question. The next standard is immediate occupancy, which is for essential facilities, including police, fire, EOCs. Essentially, there is some damage, it's repairable, but the critical uses can get back in and use it right after the event. Operational is primarily for critical infrastructure, so we're talking utilities and military kind of installations. And so in our conversation last time, we decided to focus on life safety and immediate occupancy and look for cost deltas between those two. We also explored one other consideration, which is sort of a hybrid of the two between life safety and immediate occupancy. And this was really focused on finding a solution that meant that we didn't necessarily have to take the building down and start from scratch, that the vast majority of systems would be somewhat repairable and easy to get occupancy back in within several months. I will say that all the comments up here are really our best case guess, because the nature of an earthquake is that it's random and unpredictable. So looking at these two options, with life safety as a baseline, because that's what sort of code requires, if we jump all the way to immediate occupancy, and I'll come back to the hybrid in a second, is that there's minimal damage to the structure, MEP and envelope. All damage should be repairable. MEP means mechanical, electrical, and plumbing, so the building systems. And operation should quickly resume. So we found that in talking both with the contractor, the structural engineer, and the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, that effective range of somewhere between 2.2 million and 3.2 million, with the notion that there's a big range in how robust the systems become. You can get all the way to the point of doing water storage and things like that so that you're operational relatively quickly. So in the middle ground, there's limited damages to structure and envelope. The mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems would likely to sustain some damage. Most of the damage should be repairable. Operation should resume after repairs. Things that happen relative to the structure generally is either heavier or more flexible. The mechanical systems are usually either shake tested, which means exactly what it sounds. They take the core systems and they put it on a shake table and see if they can break it. And then the connections within the systems are flexible and loose. And then same thing applies to the envelope, that when the building is moving in the event of an earthquake, the attachment methods for the envelope, the cladding and the glazing, is all relatively flexible. So assuming all that the median range is somewhere between 1 million and 1.6 million to sort of find that middle ground option.
So those were the 4 questions that we had for you. Looking ahead to the next steps, like I said in December, we are here now to get your direction on these topics. This will give Ian's team what they need to move forward with the initial building design. While they are working on that, we're anticipating an agency board work session on the park blocks and farmers market in April to bring you design refinements with cost estimates and a funding strategy. At that time, we will be asking for a decision on whether you want us to carry on with design drawings all the way to a finished set that our contractors can bid out. Similarly, we'll be back a month or so after that to have a similar discussion about the City Hall with cost estimates and a funding strategy for that. If you direct us to continue, the design teams will be in full production mode, and we would have the final construction bids in summer, fall of 2020 on both projects, with the park blocks and farmers market on the front end and the City Hall trailing behind. The park blocks and farmers market are on a trajectory to be completed by the opening of the market season in spring of 2021, and the City Hall would be open in 2022. There are those 4 questions again. There are motions prepared for you in the AAS for whatever direction you'd like to go with these, and we can answer any of your questions at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I have, looks like 4 people in the queue so far, Mike, Betty, Claire, and Alan. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. Will, last time you were here, you said that we can expect a 25% increase in construction costs from the previous time we got the $28 million answer. I'm relatively certain that in that 25% was not included things that we didn't know for certain at the time that was calculated. So for example, there's a tax that got passed at the state level that adds at every layer of, from materials to subcontractors to general contractors, which adds more cost on top of it than a 25% increase. Am I right about that?
I would say both yes, you're correct on that, and that the 25% is not extremely precise. So
okay. Would you say if we pass cap and trade as well during this legislative session, that will also add cost percentage to this?
I don't know the answer to that, but I can only imagine yes.
Okay. So we're at least 25%, and I would say we're going to be closer to 30 to 35% by the time it's all said and done on building new. The thing I was hoping we would do was set a budget and say, what can we get for that? But instead, we're making the decisions, again, based on the values that are important to us. I think this is a wrong way to approach this. You don't have to be Karnak the Magnificent to know that this council's going to vote down the first two and vote in the second two. And the last one, at least that's my guess. The last one was something we didn't have in the $28 million option. So it'll cost an extra $3 million. We just put that on there. So not only are we going to increase the $28 million by 30 to 35%, which puts us in the upper 30s at this point, but if we put seismic standard in there too, we're well over the 40 million, which is what I said last time we talked about this. We have $18 million, if you're being generous, about what we have in the bank to build this, and a need for $22 million to build a city hall. This plan, those standards. I just asked Denny this earlier, to extend the downtown urban renewal district long enough to get that $22 million, 11, 12 years maybe. If we think that the people of Eugene will allow us to extend the downtown urban renewal district for another 12 years, I think we're all crazy to expect that. That will hit the ballot. We know that. It's happened before, and it will fail. The only other way to pay for it that I'm aware of is to put it out on a ballot. And we don't have that money either. And that won't pass if we put it out on a ballot. So we can vote on this all day long. I'll vote no on all of them because I think it's the absolute wrong approach. We should set a budget and say, what can we get for that with the money we have? Because either way we ask the public with those two options and guarantee you what will come back in the summer will cost us $40 million. The public will say no. I really wish we could look at this in a different way than the direction we're going, because I think we would be more productive. Thank you.
Okay, Eddie.
Thank you. I thought I was first for once.
That's right.
Hard to beat him.
I think we should build for the future and not building that's going to be torn down in 50 years or to last 50 years, for example. I would like a third choice on the first motion, which would be build extra floors to bring back other city offices that are rented, where people are in rental offices all over the city. I think it's really important to have the offices that people need in one position, in one spot, one location. For example, planning and permit should be with city manager, with the city council. But I don't approve of building extra floors to rent out, but to bring back city offices, I think would be really worthwhile. And it would save money. We're spending a lot of money now for renting office space all over the city. And eventually, probably the city should sell the Atrium building. It was a great commercial spot in the past. And it would be, the offices that are over there would be better, would serve the public better if they were concentrated in one spot and near the county also. As for the parking, I think the underground parking is worth doing. I think it's needed. Parking is getting really to be a big problem already. And you get rid of the butterfly lot, you've got more of a problem. And I understand that we're getting rid of the parking on 20 spaces on 8th Avenue, too. I think instead of saying how much money do we have and what can we get for it, we should say what do we need and what is good for the future of the city. And then you think about how to get the money, which is, as far the sustainability, I would go for the sustainability. Oh, I don't think the certification is the important thing. It should be sustainable, but I don't know about this, whether having the certificate matters or not. Seismic standards, I would go for the hybrid. I think we have We have 2 fire stations, don't we, that would be usable for operations and we don't have to, the council doesn't have to meet immediately if there's an earthquake. It would be other people who would be in charge of emergency operations. Thank you.
Okay, Claire?
Thank you. Thanks for laying this out so clearly and answering the questions that we had. So I'm not in favor of building additional office space to lease or for bringing city workers over in the future. I think there will be a future opportunity for us to take over this county building or the courthouse part of it and retrofit that for city workers, though that's going to be far out in the future. Been waiting a while for City Hall. We're going to have to wait a while for that. I'm not in favor of the underground parking. I think that's a crazy amount of money for us to spend on something that we're trying to discourage people from doing, which is bringing cars downtown. And I say that being someone who will be inconvenienced by not having underground parking if I'm still active in city government when this is built. And I also wonder, depending on what seismic option we land on, how additional costs would be incurred for applying the seismic to the underground parking. So I don't know if that was taken into account in any of these. Thanks for the information about LEED and the other options. I raised that not necessarily because I have any opposition to the LEED, and I recognize it's city policy, but I really wanted to surface what the costs were and what the other options were. And in the scheme of what we might expect the total cost of this building to be, an additional $45,000 to, work within the parameters of that certification and to be able to stick with city policy and earn that certification, I'm fine with sticking with the city policy, which is to work for the LEED Silver. I did have a question. So administration and monitoring is the same whether we do an equivalent or we do the actual certification. The additional cost is the $5,000, I guess we send to the LEED organization. Can you give an example of what the things are that are involved that create that $40,000 cost?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You want
sure.
It's mostly,
There's a lot of different things that happen during LEED just to maintain accountability. And so one example would be that the contractor has to keep track of everything that goes, building materials that get recycled versus go to landfill, or whether or not certain materials have environmental product declarations has to be assessed throughout the course of the project. And then just managing the simplicity of sort of checking the boxes on the points themselves has to be accounted for. So there's a lot of just pieces and parts like that.
So the $40,000 is really to pay someone for their time to do all of that checking and monitoring and reporting. Okay. On the seismic standard, I really like the Life Safety Plus. I think that's a good alternative. It's not as expensive as immediate occupancy, but does a much better job of protecting our investment in this building than just doing life safety, where we would basically probably have to tear the building down and rebuild. And I did note in the memo that Will sent us that we are insured for $75 million. Is that correct? So that, would help us reestablish the building under a Life Safety Plus without having to do a total demolition. So I would like to see that be our standard. Thank you.
Alan?
Yeah, I've heard cap and trade blamed for a lot of things, but I'm not sure how it adds to the cost of a building, like compared to what? I mean, the energy cost potentially could be higher, but actually what cap and trade shows is that the cost of energy will go down. Having an old retrofit building would actually cost more than a new building because it'd be much more efficient. So actually, I think the answer to is cap and trade is going to make the building cost go down because it'll be more, less expensive power over the long term with EWEB. On the extra floors, if you recall, when I first got on the council, Mike got on the council, we were doing an all consolidated building plan for City Hall. And it was, and I helped lead the effort to kill it because it was well over $100 million, and there was no way we were going to do that. So adding more floors adds cost, and we actually did do the analysis of what it costs to do our rents and our leases, and most of our leases are actually cheaper than adding new building space, as I recall, if not most of the rental spaces that we have, because the leases are really good rates, and they're pretty inexpensive, and we can't replicate that by building a new building and taking on the capital costs and other things. So, so adding more floors is not a money saver. It might add more people there, but it's just going to add to the cost of it. So I'm much more in favor of a modest building that meets our needs. I think the public meetings, whether they be on the first or second floor, but overlooking the plaza and the farmers market is incredibly important to this project. That's what we desperately need is more public meeting space, and having the council chambers be multi-purpose is really important. How many parking spots would be available for this lot, for the full lot and half the lot, if you didn't go underneath the? How many spaces could you get?
Just for on-street parking?
No, underground.
Oh, underground. So the whole area would be about 100 spaces per level, and so if you did a half level, it'd be 50 spaces.
Yeah.
But in our initial analysis, we realized that if you do a half level, a lot of your costs, it's not half as the cost because you're paying for the ramp still. You're still paying for elevator and stairs and circulation and any of the systems that go into it. So your cost per space goes up quite a bit.
4.5 million, it's more like maybe 6.
Something like that, yeah.
That's still way too much money, even if for half that. I don't see the need for the underground parking. So I'm not in favor of that. As far as the LEED certification, so the big difference in the chart here is the monitoring and the USGBC reviews. So what are they looking for? What are they reviewing? Adherence to the spec designs, the quality, accountability. How does that add value to the building?
Well, I think that they're reviewing whether or not you've hit the points. So in each of the milestones that you have, each of the categories that you have, you're trying to accumulate points to get to your level of certification. And so they're going back and reviewing to make sure that you've actually done what you said you were going to do. And so once you've done that, then you get your plaque. I think the difference between those two is that if the city wanted to be able to say that we were LEED Silver equivalent, we would still have to do our own accounting of each of those pieces and parts to make sure that we were being legitimate. And then the 5,000 is whether you actually certify or not.
Mm-hmm. And that's having them do the certification review process. Okay. Has anybody done any analysis of the value added to and the cost of operations for LEED Silver buildings versus other buildings?
I believe there are studies out there. I'm not terribly familiar with them per se. There are general comments about the things that come from LEED, like access to daylight and things like that, that improve productivity. There's several studies out there that range between 15 to 30% sort of efficiency gains, decrease in productivity or decrease in absenteeism in the building itself. But there's nothing that I'm personally familiar with where someone has actually said LEED Silver gains you X amount over your operations.
Finally, the building cost, was that for the seismic, is that based on square feet?
It's the engineer's sort of best assumptions about each of those pieces, but looking at $1 per square foot cost applied to the amount of square footage that we're programmed to have.
I'm in favor of immediate occupancy, but I could live with the other one.
Chris?
Thank you. We've been talking about this for a long time, so I just need to refresh my memory. The $28 million building that we keep talking about, where was that building going to be built?
That was on the former City Hall site.
So we're not going to build a building on that hall site?
Correct.
And that building had certain design elements that we had talked about before, the cladding, the building materials, all other stuff. And so when we got a bid for it, it was $28 million. Are we planning to rebuild that building?
No.
No. The site we're going to build on, would it fit that building?
Yes, it would fit that building.
It would fit that building. So something in that scale would fit there. But we've already talked about not building that building in terms of the building materials, the cladding, so many others. So the $28 million building is something from 4 years ago. It's an artifact.
Correct.
So we'll be building something different at a different price tag. So we can't start at $28 million because that building doesn't exist anymore. It was a bid we got on a building on a different site in a different configuration. So we are in more control about what we design now and what we bid now. So we can, and this is to Mike's point, we can say, no, we don't want to build a building that is that expensive. We want to build a more economical building. And that's what these questions are all about. So I don't want to talk about the $28 million building because that's a 4-year-old artifact on a different site. I want to talk about the building we're going to build now. And I do think it's reasonable to say, what's our budget now? What kind of money do we have available? Which will be a conversation about where could we get funds from. But to get now at these 4 questions, I agree. I don't think we want to do that because it would be too expensive. Nobody would want to lease this space from us because it would be too expensive to build. And I don't think we need to build the floors for consolidating the city because I want to build a 21st century city hall, not a 19th century city hall. And I think concepts of governance have changed significantly since the 19th century in terms of what the administrative function, what the city function should be. So I want to build a 21st century city hall. And I think that's on the scale that we're talking about now. So no, we don't need the additional floors in my mind. Underground parking, everybody's already said it's just way too expensive for what you get. I do think we have to address parking, but this is the most expensive way to address it, so I wouldn't do that. The sustainability question is an interesting one because you say if you just have the standard and you try to build to the standard, but there's no monitoring, how do you know you built to that standard? Nobody's checking. And so you can say, well, we gave them the standard, but we don't know whether they built to it or not. Well, what's the point? So I think, you know, if you're going to try to achieve a standard, you should verify that you actually achieved that standard. And so I think, you know, the LEED Silver, if we're going to try to do something approaching that, it should be verified that we actually did that. So I think that's what we should do. In terms of the seismic standards, I like what you've done to come up with the hybrid model. I absolutely am appalled at the idea of building a building that we'd have to tear down. So that doesn't make sense to me. So I like the hybrid option.
All right, Jennifer.
Thank you. Perhaps you guys can help me understand this timeline. So we're going to make these decisions, and then the next time you guys come back to us, you're going to, how far along is the design? Like, at what point is the next time we see you? Does that make sense?
So the next time you'll see us, we'll actually be talking about the farmers market and the park blocks.
No. The next time we talk about City Hall.
Ian, do you want to explain?
Sure. So at that point, we'll have gone through our schematic design process. And so at that point, we'll have a reasonable cost estimate to sort of share with you to understand what the building is coming in relative to budget. You also have a good sense of the overall layout of the building, the character and quality of the materials, and sort of the overall impression.
Okay, and you said relative to budget. So what is your assumed budget?
I would say our relative budget relative to the design in front of you, and there'll be a number that the cost estimators and the contractor have sort of applied to the design that you're seeing.
So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how are you going to make decisions? Like, I assume you will have to make decisions that have costs associated with them. And if they're not these 4 things, how are you going to know what decision to make if you don't have a budget?
So we'll have the budget after the schematic design, and then we can make adjustments as needed if the budget isn't within the parameters of what you can afford.
Okay, so you're going to take these 4 decisions, you're going to go back and make a plan, and then you're going to come back and say, hey, how does this look? And then you're going to make changes.
Right, so we're still going through the programming of the building and figuring out what the different offices need. And so we'll refine the design enough to a schematic level so that we can get a decent pricing exercise out of that.
So maybe,
And then we'll come back
are you what
at
you're
you.
saying, kind of like the base, like what the minimum pretty much that we need, and then we're going to come back and add to that? I guess I'm trying to figure out how is this going to work? Like, you come back with some number.
What a schematic.
Maybe that would help.
Yes.
funding plan.
So schematic design is usually that we've worked through the appearance of the building, the layout of the building, the structural systems that will likely be in place, the mechanical systems that are likely to be in place to meet the overall expectations of these questions and other things that we've been given.
Okay.
So we go at that point to get the number because as designers, we have some sense of what costs are, and we're always trying to keep costs reasonable, particularly when we're working on public projects. But it's the contractor who has a better sense of the market and the where costs are landing. And so we're working closely with them to sort of keep things kind of right-sized based on the expectations that we're discussing today.
Okay. All right. Because my concern is, I mean, Alan mentioned the $100 million plus thing, and I don't want us to end up in a place, like I was not on council then, but I was in some focus groups, and it just kind of felt like it got out of hand, and it just like was going forward with this momentum, and then we got this huge number, and you know, then it's like, whoa, like what do we do now? And I would hate for a number to come back that's like just totally out of the ballpark, because it doesn't seem like we have a ballpark. I feel very uncomfortable in this space. But it sounds like we shall see when you come back. Maybe you guys have it in hand.
I think that's part of what we're trying to do is give you a ballpark, because right now you have about $15 million for sure locked away, and there could be some flexibility around some other funds, if some of you have mentioned. We won't be able to build a city hall on the park blocks that meet all of these requirements for $15 million. It just will be really hard to do unless we make a structure that I just don't think would meet these certifications. So I think part of what we need to do is figure out what is the ballpark, and then how do we either scale it back, or maybe it does come in lower when you can scale it up. But I think at this point, we know it's going to be higher than that number, but we don't know how much. And so I think we're trying to get you the information you need so you can make that decision about how you want to move forward.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm nervous too, so we don't want to get too far out, and I just keep reminding ourselves we're in control of this. We can stop at any point, which is the whole point of the rock cairn analogy.
Okay. Good. I'm good.
Emily?
Thank you. Just to get them out of the way, I'm fine with LEED Silver and the middle Life Safety Plus. The rest of it, you know, is such a conundrum. It's money, and what things have we said we want? We want density. We want to go up. Where do we get off building a 3-story building if everything's supposed to go taller? I don't want to build floors to lease out when we're leasing other floors. I agree that it would be nice to have a central area where permits and muni court and all the stuff that we do were together. I'd love to get the 4th floor of the library so we can have that makerspace, which is something that we already have the stuff, and we just need a place for the 4th floor people to go. So we've got these goals of density and height, but we can't afford them. So how does that work out? I don't like it. The underground parking, I think people should be able to go to City Hall and park, but I think that's also old thinking. And if it was private land, get the building to cover up more of the land, get more property tax, but this isn't private land. So, and it costs way too much money. So I'm a little regretful to not have the underground parking, because it makes much better use of space than a whole nother structure somewhere else. So ideally, I want it to be 6 stories or 8 stories tall and have underground parking. But we have no idea where we're going to get the extra money. So, you know, I can see the extra floors in the parking are, you know, they're not going to happen. But where are the trade-offs? Where do we decide, you know, we don't need grade A sinks, you know, they'll function but uglier for grade B sinks? And who gets to make all these decisions? You're going to come back with a building. It sounds like you're going to be pretty far along with the design. And, you know, so who really gets to make the decisions about the designs? I understand we're not going to get the nitty-gritty picky stuff, but who is? I want that job. The money, the money, the money. How dare we get so pie in the sky when we don't have any kind of budget or know where we're going to get it? and how dare we only build a 3-story building? So that's the conundrum.
So I have 2 counselors that want a second round. I want to just say a quick thing, and then we have 4 motions that we'd like to get through. So I'll give you a quick minute for your second rounds. Mike, and then Claire. Oh, and Alan, okay, but got to each hold it very close, okay.
The last building wasn't designed to be done with gold banisters and, silver lining on the ceiling. It was designed in a very economical manner, much like this one will be. And if it's 30,000 square feet for that one and this one, that's why I use that as a starting point, because it will be virtually similar. Secondarily, the parking that we're talking about puts this then at what, 58 million by the numbers I was stacking up there before? So we obviously won't vote for that. Like I said, we'll vote for the last 2, but not the first 2. Then it'll be over $40 million when it comes back, and we have no idea where we're going to get that. I would like to say, though, to be a little bit more useful, we desperately need parking downtown with what we are doing. One, the city hall, because we're taking the parking we use away. But number 2, we're building hundreds of units of housing downtown without parking. Along the riverfront, there's hundreds of new units that are going in the Market District. And a block and a half from where we're sitting right now, there's a young man in the audience who's very fond of telling people about this, and nobody's been listening well. But about a block and a half from here, there's an underground parking facility with surface level parking on top that was built initially as with a base to it that can house 3 stories of parking on top of it. So with the needed parking from the Market District and the Riverfront District, why aren't we working on a public-private partnership to build on top of the county lot that's a block and a half from here that was built to have a parking garage on it? Or is that something we can consider at some point?
We're actually exploring that now, so.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Patricia, for reminding me of that. I appreciate that.
Right.
The thing I would say, though, is we're going to vote on these, and the staff's going to go away. And they're going to bring back the numbers. And it's not going to be until the summer. And they'll be what we're talking about here. They'll be close to 40. And we still haven't talked about, we have a ceiling for our budget, and we still haven't talked about where's that money coming from. And this is the wrong process for this and for not going through the process of addressing those. When the number comes back, the community will be unhappy about it. So I just want to say I don't think we should vote today. I really don't. You can predict how it'll come out, but if this is all we do without setting a budget, we're asking for trouble from our community.
Claire.
Thank you. So, sorry, I had a couple more questions about the lead on slide 10. You showed the relative cost of the programs that you explored, and you put, $2 sign for the lead silver. So am I correct in assuming that's kind of the equivalent to the $45,000 cost that you put in our information? And that the other,
A loose way, it includes probably the construction costs as well.
Okay.
into it,
Yes.
Which that slide before, the 40,000 is just the admin.
is just the admin cost,
So
okay.
this is more taking into consideration also the
The additional, so a lead gold costs more because of the materials and other things. And then in terms of the lead certification, does it take into account more than just the savings of an energy-efficient building? Does it also speak to the environmental impact of the construction itself or the creation of the materials used in the construction? Is that an aspect of LEED certification?
Yes.
absolutely, yes.
Okay, so it's also how you build the building, not just what the result is once it's up.
Right.
And the materials.
So, the prior building, the prior design was, I think, a super fancy building. It had this permeable glass skin on the outside that would, change with the climate. And I don't know how much that added to the overall cost, but it seemed very out of our budget in my mind. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about that before it was yanked off the table. So, whether we set a budget now and, or get an estimate from the direction we've given now, we are going to face some public opposition to this project. There is no two ways around that. and we're going to have to make difficult choices about how we pay for this building. But what I hear the city manager saying is that after we see the schematic and the estimated cost, we can decide if and how we want to bridge the gap between the money we have set aside and what it might cost, or dial back the plans for the building that's being presented to us. So none of these decisions are final. They are giving direction to this team to come back and say, all right, with this direction you've given us and the other things you said this building needs, here's our best estimate right now of what it will cost to build. And then we can decide from there what we're going to do next.
Okay, I have Greg wanting a first round and then Alan.
So this is to the city manager. I know that people have had conversations about this, but I want to kind of narrow this down in terms of if we're moving forward with this and we do move forward with it, then, you know, what are the sources of extra money that we're going to be able to get to finish the project? I mean, there's only a couple in my mind.
Yeah. Well, we didn't explore the total, like, numbers on each of these, but you received a memo that has a list of all the different possible ones.
Yeah, I
It
saw
could be,
that.
yeah. So I think the ones that you've talked about previously that felt like could possibly go forward would be potentially expanding or extending the downtown urban renewal district, the possible of a geo bond and putting it out, or there were some other pieces in here, so
Yeah.
you would have to choose, and we'll be able to, you know, once we know what that number is, we can give you our ideas of if it's this number, here's how you could potentially go forward on any one of these. The majority of the council has said you've wanted to move this forward. If you are feeling like cold feet about that, like, hey, we actually want to stop and just talk about funding, we can always do that too. But so far, my direction has been, and it's felt consistent, like, let's get you some information so you can make a decision. And if you decide we don't want to go forward, well, then we can always stop.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, just to be clear, what we're doing here is we're narrowing down this concept of new city hall so that we can get a price estimate, cost estimate, which can be adjusted later depending on what we find out. So I think that's an appropriate way to go about doing it. We've got parameters around what we want. Let's get an estimate what that costs, and then we can adjust that. And so depending on what we find out. So I think one of the things we've asked for is a funding plan / recommendation. So we've got a list of potentials, but once we get a better handle on what the cost is, then I suspect you're going to bring back a funding plan as part of that. The other info request, if we could get the previous leases cost study that we did. I don't think everybody's seen that. And also summary of the building comparison costs. I don't think everybody's seen that either. So those pieces of information would be real valuable to folks.
Which, I'm sorry, the last one you're talking about? I'm not sure I know what you're talking
Study of
about.
all the different options that were in front of us in terms of the E1 building.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
That's an old number.
As far as I know, that's the only
Yeah,
legitimate
Cameron
study
McCarthy work, yeah.
that actually has been done to estimate what the costs are. And everybody else is just pie in the sky, as far as I know. That's a legitimate number. And and Cameron McCarthy is actually the firm that we hired to do this stuff. So if we don't believe those numbers, we're not going to believe these numbers, so.
Okay, it's 7 o'clock. I want to make one comment, and then I do want to put these 4 motions on the table, or have the president do that. And my comment is just a reminder that you are in the process of reviewing a draft, the public, of a Climate Action Plan 2.0, and that a couple of these elements are very relevant to that Climate Action Plan. And one is discouraging people from driving downtown with their cars and creating that sort of urban landscape. And the second is holding ourselves accountable to reducing our impact through construction and how we're building it. So it feels to me that the monitoring of what happens is holding ourselves accountable. And so that feels like a very important point for you to connect the dots as counsel of these 2 projects. So with that said, I would like to turn to Council President to put the first motion on the table.
Do I get to choose which one?
You do.
I don't like either of them. I move to direct the city manager to design City Hall without additional floors of leasable real estate.
Second.
All in,
No, do we have
you
no
want to
discussion?
discuss still? Okay, Betty?
Move to substitute a motion to design it with additional city halls to bring back to for city offices that are currently paying rent in other buildings.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about that? Oh, do you want to speak to that?
I would like to be in the queue for subsequent to this, dealing with this
Okay. Okay.
amendment.
All right.
Mayor, I just want to remind you, just in case, that we don't have a work session on Wednesday. We have an open space, so if we, at some point, want to finish all of these on Wednesday, we can also do that.
True. Okay. Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Good idea.
I'm not saying we shouldn't keep going, I just wanted to remind you.
I would like to keep going as far as we can. If it takes too long, we'll bump. Okay, because it would be nice to have it at the table. Alan?
Some clarification, I'm not sure what you meant by that, Betty, because there's an enormous amount of the city operations that we lease. If we bring them all into this building, it's going to be 8 stories tall, and it's going to be $100 million.
Okay, let it be. But that is, though, as much as we can, especially the offices that the public needs access to, like the permit and planning, or things that the public needs. We don't need to have the human resources in the city hall. That would be lower on the list, but as much as possible. We're spending a lot of money for public renting space. And I know a lot of people in the community are upset about that and want to know exactly how much, and I think especially the things that people need to have access to should be where they can find them easily.
Okay, clear enough? All in favor of the substitute language? 1, 2, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or did you vote 6? Okay, all right, so that goes down. So we're back to the original motion. Mike, did you want to speak to it?
I would like to move, how do we want to do that? I wanted to move to consider budget first with Wednesday, and now I'm thinking I'd like to postpone all of this with it, and I don't know the right motion to make for this, to capture that we should have a more thorough conversation on each of these points, and it's already after 7. And so I guess I would say move to postpone this debate over these issues to Wednesday and to add the discussion of budget and money sourcing.
You have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other comments or discussion on that?
If I could speak to it, I would
Yes.
say that if we're planning on either of those two options, we really ought to ask the community before we get staff on this for months of planning. We're wasting months. Because if the community says, heck no, to both of those two options, then anything over the amount of money we have is off the table. Why aren't we having that conversation with the community before we set staff to months of work planning for this? I'm just saying it deserves a discussion as an idea.
Okay, all in favor of postponing and adding budget discussion to Wednesday? 1, 2, 3, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that goes down. Okay, so now we're still back to the original motion. Any other comments? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm in favor. So
What was that? That was the
that's moved to direct city manager to without additional floors. Correct? Did you vote as you wanted to vote? Yes.
You just
Make
voted
sure.
in favor, Mayor?
I did, without additional floors. Yeah, the original motion. So I do think that it's 7:10, and we should I'll get a sense of council. Do you want to extend this meeting and go through the other four, or do you want to wait until a head nod will, you want to push on? Want to push on?
What do you do on Wednesday?
Okay, all right. Okay, so you want to put the next motion on the table?
Move to direct the city manager to design City Hall without underground parking.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed? 1. Okay, that passes. Great. Next one.
Move to direct the city manager to design City Hall to achieve LEED Silver certification.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2. Okay, that passes. All right, great. Seismic Standards.
Move to direct the city manager to design City Hall to a seismic standard above life safety with the intent of City Hall being repairable after an earthquake.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 2, and that passes. So that was very quick. Thank you very much, and we are adjourned.